ಇಬ್ಬಂದಿಯಲ್ಲಿಯೇ ದರ್ಶನ ಕಾಣೋ.
Namaste. Shekhar Purna here. Date 22/07/2026. Though the matter presented here might seem somewhat personal, I am speaking of this proposition as an illustration of the many crimes and delivery of justice concerning land tracts widespread across Karnataka. Furthermore, I wanted to understand how AI analyzes a court judgment. Therefore, I subjected the judgment or order delivered by the court of the technical assistant to the Deputy Commissioner and ex officio Director of Land Records Tumakuru regarding a complaint filed by me to AI analysis. I am presenting the deep analysis provided by AI in the second part of this piece exactly as it is, along with all the errors perceived by AI, as an example of AI still being in an immature state. I have not corrected the AI's analysis. The case presented here can also be considered an illustration of how ordinary people and certain advocates misuse the court of law. Everything I have personally stated here is spoken in accordance with the documents available to me, and I would like to record one fact here. Since some of the related cases are still pending adjudication in court, and in the belief that this should not prejudice, sub judice, any decision the court may take, or any petitions, arguments or disputes I myself might present before the court, I am presenting this solely based on that understanding. On 20/07/2026, I personally visited the Madhugiri police station and submitted a complaint, even though the complaint had already been submitted via email earlier. According to legal rules, after submitting a complaint via email, one must personally appear at the police station and submit a written complaint. Hence, visiting the Madhugiri police station became inevitable. Background details. Huvinahalli is a small village consisting of no more than 40 to 50 houses even today. As I remember, there were 3 Brahman families. Among them, my mother's father, Mr. Vasudev Rao, was one of them. His profession was that of a Shanubhoga, village accountant or patwari. He had total of 4 children. The first is Mr. H.V. Satyanarayan Rao, deceased. The second is Mrs. H.V. Savitramma, deceased. The third is my mother, Mrs. Sri Sheelamma, alias Nagamma. And the last is Mr. H.V. Rama Rao, who according to unconfirmed news has also passed away. As the Karnataka Village Offices Abolition Act 1961 came into force, my brother-in-law H.V. Rama Rao served for some time as a village panchayat secretary, then got promoted as a village accountant, and finally retired as the Shirastedar of Koratagire Taluk. When a family dispute arose regarding the property belonging to Vasudev Rao's children and the children of Vasudev Rao's younger brother Keshav Rao all stood before Vasudev Rao and asked him to partition and allot the property. The thought of the family breaking apart did not feel pleasant to Vasudev Rao, so when he refused to consent to the property partition, a partition deed was prepared under leadership and everyone except Vasudev Rao, who did not consent to the property partition, signed it. H.V. Rama Rao, who was the secretary of the Gram Panchayat, changed the Pahani accounts in the handwriting of that era long before computers entered to the names of all those who had signed the deed. H.V. Rama Rao had total of 5 children: H.R. Harish, Lakshmi Devamma, Shantamma, Nagaraj and Ratna. Nagaraj demanded a property partition before his father. At the time when the property was supposed to be allotted, H.R. Harish filed a suit for original property partition against his father, brother and sisters in the Madhugiri court. Original suit number 380/2018. Without making Vasudev Rao's other legal heirs respondents in this original suit and concealing them, he submitted a notarized family tree to the court showing that H.R. Rama Rao was the only son of Vasudev Rao. Within 13 days of filing the original suit, and even before the suit notices reached the respondents, everyone got together and filed a joint compromise petition before the court. Accepting the compromise petition, the court issued a decree. When the above facts came to my attention, I filed a complaint at the Madhugiri police station. It underwent investigation. Leaving out 1 or 2 individuals, the investigating officers of the Madhugiri police station submitted a charge sheet to the court. Providing information regarding the excluded individuals and furnishing prima facie documents to the court, I filed a private complaint. The court has taken cognizance of the offence against both H.R. Harish and H.R. Nagaraj, and the trial in this case is yet to be completed, that is, it is pending. Case number CC142023. In the interim period between the aforesaid complaint and the charge sheet, H.R. Nagaraj created a statement stating that Vasudev Rao is still alive and is personally getting land surveyed and given to his grandchildren. It is found that H.V. Ramarao, H.R. Harish and Nagaraj had all signed that statement. Based on the survey map, he got the Pahani and Khata transferred from the Revenue Department and sold the land to Ramalingappa of Talkere, Madhugiri Taluk. Selling it directly, Nagaraj's wife Mrs. Jayashri and son Prajwal both signed the registered sale deed. Prior to signing, Mrs. Jayashri and Prajwal had no such documents in their names. It is known through evidence that the sale was executed without even considering how the right to sell had vested. Similarly, agricultural land in Dadagundanhalli village was sold to Mrs. Mahadevi, a resident of Bangalore. Reviewing all the evidence, I filed a complaint against Mrs. Jayashri, Prajwal, Ramalingappa and Mahadevi. Prior to this complaint, Venkatesh Prasad, who was a surveyor in the office of the Deputy Director of Land Records at Madhugiri, recorded the statement of a deceased person and prepared a map regarding which I filed a complaint in the office of the Deputy Director. Taking note of this, the Deputy Director filed an appeal before the court of the Technical Assistant to the Deputy Commissioner and ex officio Director of Land Records Tumakuru, seeking to cancel the survey measurement. I also submitted an application to the court wanting to be a respondent in this very appeal and submitted all my pleas and arguments. The court, having heard my plea and arguments, delivered a judgment in my favor. It is this very judgment that I have subjected to AI analysis. The clever yet ridiculous and crafty way in which AI has analyzed how AI can assist paperless justice is something I am placing before you all. Shekhar Purna.
Picture this. You're asked to feed, like an incredibly complex legal case, into a modern artificial intelligence. You probably expect pristine logic, right?
Yeah, I mean, you imagine the AI just slicing through all the jargon, finding the objective truth, and spitting out this flawless mathematical conclusion.
Exactly. But what happens when you, the listener, feed that same machine a sprawling, multi-generational web of forged handwritten records, fake family trees, and, I mean, you can't make this up, a government land survey conducted by an actual ghost.
It sounds totally like magical realism, but it is a very real test of where our technology actually stands today. Because, you know, if we assume the data going into an AI is objective, we assume the output is undeniable.
Right.
But when you introduce uniquely messily human deceit into a system that's designed for pure logic, well, the results are deeply revealing.
And that is exactly the collision we are unpacking in this deep dive. We're looking at a first-hand account titled Namaste Shekhar Purna here.
Yeah.
And it's dated July 22, 2026.
Yeah.
This document, it starts off sounding like this highly localized village drama over some farmland in Karnataka, India. But as Shekhar unravels his own family's history, it morphs into this profound commentary on the bleeding edge of AI and really the terrifying vulnerabilities in our automated justice systems.
It is a remarkable document. I mean, Shekhar Purna isn't just venting about a grueling property dispute. He is actively using his own hard-won legal battles as raw data for an experiment.
It's just such a unique approach.
Totally. He wants to know what happens when you ask AI to process paperless justice when it's built on a foundation of corrupted information.
Right. And before we get to the AI hallucinating over ghost surveyors, and yes, I promise you we will explain the ghost, we need to lay down a quick disclaimer.
Yes, very important.
Shekhar is very careful to state that some of the legal matters he discusses are still pending trial. So in legal terms, they are sub judice.
Right. They haven't been finalized.
Exactly. So he is sharing this narrative strictly as an illustration of how widespread land crimes operate, based purely on the documents he has physically uncovered.
Yeah.
We are not here to prejudice any ongoing court decisions. We're simply exploring the mechanics of the system exactly as he experienced them.
And, you know, to really grasp why the AI failed so spectacularly at the end of his experiment, we have to look at the analog history of this conflict.
Right, the human element.
Exactly. We need to look at how human beings figured out how to, hack the system long before computers were ever even involved.
Okay, let's unpack this history then. We are traveling back decades to a tiny place called Huvina Halli, We're talking incredibly small, like even today, it's maybe 40 to 50 houses.
Wow, very small.
Yeah, and according to Shekhar, there were just 3 Brahmin families living there at the time. So the patriarch of one of these families was his grandfather, a man named Mr. Vasudeva Rao. Now, Vasudeva Rao wasn't just a farmer. He held the title of Shanapoga.
Right. And for a global listener, a Shanapoga was essentially the village accountant or the master of records. This was an incredibly powerful local position.
Okay.
The Shanapoga manually maintained the ledgers that dictated, who owned which parcel of land, what crops were grown, what revenue was due to the government.
So they were basically the source of truth for the village.
Exactly. In an era before digital databases, the person who held the pen held the absolute truth.
So keep that ultimate authority in mind. Vasudeva Rao has 4 children. There's his son, Satyanarayana Rao, daughter Savitrama, and Srishilama, who, by the way, is Shekhar Purna's mother, and another son, Rama Rao.
Gotcha.
Eventually, a classic family conflict bubbles up. The children, along with some cousins, approach Vasudeva, and they demand that he partition the property. They basically want their individual shares allotted to them right then and there.
But Vasudeva Rao flatly refuses. And what's fascinating here is his motivation. Really, he doesn't refuse out of spite or, greed. He refuses because the very idea of dividing the land physically represents the breaking apart of his family. And that deeply upsets him. He genuinely believes that if the land stays united, the family has to stay united.
I can completely visualize this.
Oh.
I mean, it's like a patriarch sitting on a massive, priceless heirloom.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone wants their piece to sell off or take home, but the patriarch knows that the second he breaks it apart, they will all go their separate ways and probably never speak again.
Oh, exactly. But what's fascinating here is the supreme irony of the situation. I mean, Vasudeva Rao's entire professional life, his actual duty as the Shanapoga, was dedicated to protecting the integrity of land records.
Right.
Yet it was the blatant manipulation of those exact types of records by his own flesh and blood that sparked this decades-long nightmare. Because, well, his family did not just accept his refusal.
No, they didn't. They basically realized that if the patriarch wouldn't give them the land, they would just bypass him entirely.
Yeah.
Like Shekhar's account details how they drew up a rogue partition deed under new leadership.
Yeah.
Everyone signed it. The siblings, the cousins, everyone except Vasudeva Rao himself.
Which brings us to the mechanics of how you actually steal land on paper in the mid-20th century. One of Vasudeva's sons, H.V. Rama Rao, had built his own career in village administration.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he eventually became a village panchayat secretary and later a senior court official, which is known as a shirastadar. So he intimately understood the plumbing of the local bureaucracy.
And he used that administrative access as a weapon.
Yeah.
Like Shekhar points out that Rama Rao went into the Pahani accounts. And just for context, these are the crucial agricultural land records that list ownership and cultivation details.
Right.
Rama Rao manually changed these handwritten ledgers to insert the names of everyone who signed that rogue partition deed. He completely ignored the fact that his father, the actual legal owner, never consented.
Think about the implications of this for a moment. This was an era where there were no digital backups, no blockchain verification or anything. Whoever controlled the physical ledger literally controlled reality. Rama Rao essentially overwrote his father's ownership. This initial act of administrative forgery laid a toxic foundation. I mean, it established a precedent within this specific family that paper could simply be fabricated to erase inconvenient facts.
So if we fed that 1961 handwritten document into an AI today, it wouldn't flag a thing, would it? It would just read the ink on the page and accept it as historical fact.
Precisely. An AI cannot detect the malicious intent behind a change in handwriting in an old ledger. It just assumes the data it is fed is a faithful representation of reality.
Right.
And that assumption is exactly what this family continues to exploit as we move forward in time.
Let's fast forward to 2018. The original perpetrators have passed on. Rama Rao now has 5 children of his own, and that includes sons named Nagaraj and H.R. Harish. The family history basically repeats itself.
Of course it does.
Nagaraj starts demanding his share of the property from his father. But before any normal division can happen, his brother, Harish, launches a massive preemptive legal strike. Harish goes to the Madhugiri court and files original suit number 380 against his own father, brother, and sisters.
And this is where the fraud graduates from just altering village ledgers to actively deceiving the judicial system itself.
Yes.
When Harish files this suit, he submits a formally notarized family tree. But this official-looking document is a complete fabrication. It claims that his father, Rama Rao, was the only son of the original patriarch, Vasudeva Rao.
Okay, let's unpack this, because he legally erased his own aunts and uncles from existence. He literally wiped Shekhar's mother and her siblings completely off the map.
Yeah, just totally gone on paper.
But wait, stops there. Shekhar notes that within a mere 13 days of filing this suit, before the court notices even reach the respondents, the court issues a joint compromise decree. 13 days. I mean, in any judicial system, let alone the Indian court system, a 13-day turnaround sounds mechanically impossible unless someone on the inside is turning a blind eye. How does a judge just rubber stamp a fake family tree that fast?
Right. It seems impossible until you understand the specific legal mechanism they exploited here. This wasn't a trial. It was a compromise decree.
Okay.
Essentially, Harish and the family members he did include in his fake tree all walked into the court together. They basically told the judge, hey, we have a dispute, but great news. We've completely settled it amongst ourselves outside of court. Please just put an official stamp on this agreement.
Wow. So the court didn't verify the family tree because the people standing in the room weren't contesting it.
That is the systemic vulnerability. The court relies entirely on the adversarial process. It expects that if a document is fake, the opposing party will object.
Right, but they weren't there.
Exactly. Harish intentionally erased the real heir so they wouldn't even receive a summons. They couldn't object to a lawsuit they didn't know existed. It was a highly coordinated bureaucratic ambush to lock in a court-sanctioned decree at lightning speed.
That is terrifying. I mean, the system is designed to facilitate peaceful settlements, but instead, it was totally weaponized to launder stolen property. And, if you think a phantom family tree is wild, buckle up.
Yeah, it gets crazier.
Because this family realizes that if paperwork can erase the living, it can also resurrect the dead.
Which brings us to the most surreal element of Shekhar's entire account. We are shifting from the courtrooms of Madhugiri back to the physical fields of Huvinahali.
Here's where it gets really interesting. After this 13-day decree, another brother, Nagaraj, decides he wants to sell off parcels of this land, but he needs a...
Not just alive, but physically present. Nagaraj claims this deceased patriarch is personally out in the fields, actively directing a new land survey so he can gift parcels to his grandchildren.
It's insane.
And Shekhar documents that H.V. Ramarao, Harish, and Nagaraj all signed off on this absurd statement.
I have to interject with an analogy here because this is just blowing my mind. It's like a reverse ghost story,
How do you?
Well, usually the ghost is haunting the attic, rattling chains, refusing to leave the house. But in Huvinahali, the ghost is putting on work boots, walking the property lines, subdividing agricultural plots, and updating the local municipal tax ledger.
That visual is hilarious, but honestly, the mechanics of how they pulled it off are a masterclass in exploiting a broken chain of verification.
Yeah, because they didn't just do this in private.
No, they actually got a government official involved. A man named Venkatesh Prasad, who was a surveyor in the office of the Deputy Director of Land Records, actually comes out. This official surveyor actively records a legal statement, supposedly from this deceased person, and draws up a land map based on it.
But how? How does a modern digitized property system accept a survey conducted by a ghost? Do these officials not ask for, a basic ID?
This is exactly what Shekhar is trying to expose. The system failed because local bureaucrats often operate in silos.
Okay.
A sub-registrar who is processing a land sale generally only checks if the immediate preceding document looks valid. They see a freshly stamped survey map from a recognized government official. They see a 13-day court decree that, on paper, looks completely legitimate.
Right, they don't dig deeper.
They don't have the time, the mandate, or the interconnected databases to verify the entire chain of title back to the 1960s, or to check if the person who initiated the survey is, biologically alive.
So they literally just rubber stamp the next step.
Exactly. Based on this phantom survey, Nagaraj gets the kata, which is essentially the municipal property tax ledger transferred into his name. Once you have the kata, you can sell.
And they do.
They absolutely do. Agricultural land in Takir is sold to a buyer named Ramalingappa. Land in Dadagondanahali is sold to someone named Mahadevi. The chaos is so deep that Nagaraj's wife, Jayashri, and his son, Prajwal, both signed the registered sale deeds, even though neither of them had any prior legal rights or documents in their names whatsoever.
It is a complete kaleidoscope of fraud. I mean, we have a grandfather's legacy overwritten in a handwritten ledger, entire branches of a family legally erased, a 13-day compromise court decree, and a deceased man drawing up property lines.
It's overwhelming.
The sheer weight of this bureaucracy is being used to crush reality,
Mhm.
and this is the mountain of deceit that Shekhar Purna finds himself standing at the bottom of. But, instead of walking away, he decides to climb it.
And his approach is incredibly methodical. He realizes he cannot fight this with just emails and phone calls. When Shekhar uncovers the fake family tree and the ghost survey, he physically goes to the Matugiri police station. He notes in his document that this happened on July 20th, 2026.
Right, I remember that date.
He had already submitted a complaint via email, but he emphasizes that the system requires you to actually show up in person to force the issue.
That detail really grounds the story for me. Like, amidst all this talk of phantom surveys and paperwork magically changing hands in the cloud, Shekhar has to physically transport his body into a police station to demand that the real world be recognized.
And that physical persistence is the only thing that works. He forces investigation. The police eventually submit a charge sheet, though they curiously leave out a couple of key individuals.
Typical.
Right. But Shekhar doesn't accept that either. He gathers his own prima facie evidence, the foundational documents proving the fraud, and files a private criminal complaint against the people the police missed. This is CC 14/2023. The court actually acknowledges this, and that specific case is still pending trial today.
He also goes after the ghost survey directly, right?
Yes, he takes it all the way up. He goes to the regional director of land records. He files an appeal to completely cancel the absurd survey measurement conducted by Venkatesh Prasad.
Wow, okay.
And he does this in the court of the technical assistant to the deputy commissioner and ex officio director of land records in Tumakuru. Shekhar joins the case as respondent, presents his mountain of evidence, and he wins.
That's amazing.
Yeah. The court delivers a sweeping judgment in his favor, officially rejecting the ghost survey and untangling that specific knot of lies.
Which brings us to the ultimate twist of this entire deep dive. Shekhar finally has this hard-won physical court judgment in his hand. It represents years of exhaustive human intuition and persistence. And what does he do with it?
He feeds it right into an artificial intelligence.
He literally feeds it to an AI. He essentially asks the AI, can you analyze how justice was served here? He wants to test the boundaries of this technology that we are constantly told is the future of the legal profession. So what does this all mean? When he feeds this ruling into the machine, he discovers that the AI's analysis is, in his words, clever yet ridiculous and crafty.
That's a great description.
He finds it so full of errors that he intentionally leaves them uncorrected in his published document just to prove a point. What exactly did the AI hallucinate here?
Well, we have to think about how AI processes information, right? It looks for logical consistency and patterns within unstructured text. But the text Shekhar fed it, the history of the Pahani records, the fake family trees, the survey maps, it is intentionally illogical.
Oh, because it's built on lies.
Exactly. It is designed to deceive. For example, an AI cannot easily comprehend a reality where a government surveyor actively takes dictation from a dead man.
Right.
Instead of flagging it as fraud, the AI might try to rationalize it, perhaps assuming the ghost surveyor was a legitimate legal proxy or like a posthumous power of attorney.
Right, because the machine expects the legal system to act like a clean math equation.
Yeah.
It assumes a stamped court decree from 2018 is a ground truth variable. It doesn't have the context to say, wait, a 13-day turnaround for a property dispute in this jurisdiction means someone was bribed or lying.
If we zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, this is the inherent danger of paperless justice driven by algorithms. The AI struggled to untangle the forged documents because it fundamentally assumes the documents it is analyzing represent reality rather than a weaponized version of it. It gets confused by the conflicting names and the impossible timelines because it lacks the human intuition to recognize bad faith.
It's the ultimate garbage in, garbage out scenario, but on a scale that dictates human lives and property. Like, Shekhar's entire journey proves that while technology is advancing at this blistering pace, human persistence remains entirely irreplaceable.
Completely irreplaceable.
It was Shekhar's willingness to physically walk into a police station, to dig through dusty archives, to logically point out to a judge the biological impossibility of a dead man walking a property line. That is what actually achieved justice. The AI was just a spectator that got dizzy trying to follow the plot twists.
It is a vital lesson for anyone navigating our modern information landscape. I mean, as we rely more and more on automated, high-speed systems to consume data, summarize documents, and make decisions for us, we just cannot lose sight of the physical reality behind that data.
Yeah, we have to stay grounded.
Justice, especially in cases of deep-rooted systemic fraud, requires a level of critical thinking and localized context that simply cannot be programmed into a neural network yet.
And that brings our journey to a close today. We started in the tiny village of Huvina with a grandfather who just wanted his family to stay whole. We watched a handful of handwritten ledgers morph into this sprawling web of fake heirs and phantom surveyors.
What a ride!
And we ended with a profound realization about the limits of our most advanced technology.
It really forces you to look at every official document a little differently, doesn't it?
It really does. Which leads you, the listener, with one final lingering question to mull over today. It is something that has been keeping me up ever since I read Shekhar Purna's account.
Let's hear it.
If a modern AI produces ridiculous and crafty hallucinations, just trying to read and summarize a clear, victorious judgment that untangled this mess, if it fails just trying to analyze the verdict, what happens to our justice system when courts inevitably attempt to use AI to actually generate the verdicts for these deeply entangled, fraudulent cases?
That is a terrifying thought.
It really is. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping right into a really fascinating administrative order. This one is from the Land Records Department in Tumakuru District, Karnataka, and it's dated August 29th, 2024.
Right, and our mission today is basically to unpack this, because on the surface it looks like a pretty dry, dense, bureaucratic document.
Yeah, totally. It just looks like a standard land dispute over survey numbers.
Exactly. But when we actually dig into the source material, it reveals this massive vulnerability in how our society records property and, well, even identity.
Because usually, I mean, when we talk about death, right, there's this universal expectation of finality. A heart stops beating, a death certificate is issued with a very firm date stamped on it, and, the story of that physical person interacting with the real world is over.
It is the one biological absolute we all just accept. You're either alive or you're not.
Right.
But when you step into this labyrinth of ancestral land disputes and state bureaucracy, that immutable biological fact just it gets completely overwritten by administrative data.
Which is exactly what makes this Tumakuru District document so wild. Because like we said, you scratch just beneath that dry legal surface and you find a multi-generational story. We are talking about alleged forged family trees, massive institutional blind spots, and this is the craziest part, a landowner who seemingly came back from the dead.
Over 3 decades after his funeral, yeah.
Literally over 30 years later, just to be physically present for a real estate survey. It's unbelievable.
It really serves as a staggering case study in how systems of record keeping can be manipulated. And I think to understand the scale of the manipulation, we have to first look at the scale of the actual land.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the entire legal warfare we're going to talk about today centers around a tiny plot in Huvinahali village, which is in the Mudkugi Taluk. We're looking at survey number 113A, and it originally measured just 4 guntas.
Right, and just for you listening to get a sense of scale, a gunta is about a 40th of an acre. So 4 guntas is literally a 10th of an acre. It is incredibly small.
Very small.
But, in the world of ancestral property, the physical size of the land almost never matches the size of the conflict it generates. You aren't just fighting over dirt.
No, you're fighting over legacy, financial leverage, family history, all of it.
Exactly. So let's introduce the original owner of this 10th of an acre. His name was Vasudevarao. And according to a death certificate that was actually submitted as hard evidence in this administrative case, Vasudevarao died on December 13th, 1989.
And everyone listening needs to keep that specific year in mind.
Yeah.
1989. Because the official bureaucratic timeline completely divorces itself from that biological reality.
It really does.
If you fast forward to the years 2018, 2019, and 2021, the machinery of the state government's Land Records Department suddenly springs into action regarding Vasudevarao's 4 guntas.
Right, so an application is made in 2019 for something called a premutation 11E sketch. And get this, the application is actually received by the government office in the dead man's name. And then in 2021, an application for a tatkal podi, which is basically a fast-tracked land subdivision process, is submitted on the government's Mogini software system.
And we have to be clear here. This wasn't just a minor clerical error. It wasn't like a data entry operator forgot to update an old file.
Right, it was way more active than that.
Exactly. The government surveyors assigned to this case, individuals specifically named in the records as Tejaswini P. and Venkatesh Prasad, they actually went out to the physical land, they conducted the measurements, and they drew up a formal document known as a mahazar.
And in that official record, they explicitly stated that they recorded statements with Vasudevarao present in person.
Yes.
In person.
A man who died over 30 years ago is somehow standing in a field in Karnataka in 2021, nodding along to a land survey. I mean, this is basically a bureaucratic weekend at Bernie's.
That's exactly what it is. It forces us to ask how something so blatantly physically impossible just slips through the cracks. The document mentions this Mogini software system. So, is this a massive technological failure, or is it a deliberate exploitation of the humans operating it?
That distinction is crucial. It is definitely not a software glitch. In fact, you could argue the Mogini software worked perfectly.
Wait, really? Perfectly?
Well, yeah, because Mogini is designed to bring transparency and efficiency to land records by digitizing the whole process. But it operates on the fundamental principle of computing, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Oh, I see.
Digitization doesn't automatically cure corruption, it just processes it faster. The software relies entirely on the honesty and accuracy of the data, inputted by the people literally standing on the ground.
Right, the software doesn't know Vasudevarao is dead, it just processes whatever the surveyor types into the tablet.
Exactly. Let's look at the actual mechanics of the land record system mentioned in the sources, just to understand how deep this goes. You have documents like the Hisa Tippani, the Arorpaka Avand, and the Atlas.
Okay, let's slow down for a second. What actually happens in that specific chain of documents? Like, if I'm the surveyor faking this, how do those documents build the lie step by step?
Think of it like building a house on a completely fake foundation. The Hisa Tippani is essentially the architectural sketch. It maps the physical subdivision of the land based on the surveyor's field notes.
Okay, got it.
Then the Arorpaka Akar band is like the financial appraisal. That finalizes the revenue assessment and the new tax liability for these newly created plots. And finally, the Atlas physically maps those new boundaries into the broader village grid.
So it's a whole chain reaction.
Exactly. If a surveyor goes to the field and falsely notes that the original title holder is present and agrees to the measurements, the bureaucratic machinery just blindly accepts that as truth. It processes the Hisa Tippani, finalizes the Akar band, updates the Atlas, and creates legally binding subdivisions, which are known as Hisas.
Wow, so the system digitizes a lie, and suddenly that lie has the full legal weight of the state government behind it. But, you don't just randomly go out and survey a dead guy's land for fun. There has to be a catalyst to kick off all this paperwork in the first place.
And the catalyst here was a civil lawsuit filed in 2018. Its original suit number, 3802018. This suit really provides the anatomy of how a family's history gets rewritten on paper way before the surveyors ever even show up to the field.
Right. So enter a man named H.R. Harish, who is listed as the first respondent in the current administrative appeal we are reviewing today. Harish filed this civil suit back in 2018 for the partition of the ancestral property.
And this is where the second appellant in our current case, a man named Chandrasekhar V., raises a massive red flag.
Yeah, a huge one.
According to Chandrasekhar, when Harish filed that 2018 lawsuit, he submitted a completely fabricated family tree to the civil court. Harish claimed that his father, H.V. Ramarao, was the only son of the deceased Vasudevarao.
But Chandrasekhar counters that narrative entirely. He states that his own mother, Sushalama, was also a legal heir to Vasudevarao. In fact, he claims there were actually 4 legal heirs in total.
Right, so by theoretically pruning the family tree and cutting the others out, Harish engineered a situation where the court genuinely believed they were dealing with the only rightful inheritors of the estate.
And because the court was presented with this highly curated narrative, and the parties involved in the suit were presumably in total agreement with each other, the court issued what's known as a compromise decree.
Which is a huge turning point.
Yeah. Based on that legal decree, Vasudevarao's tiny 4 guntas of land were legally split right down the middle. 2 guntas went to Harish, which created survey number 113A, and the other 2 guntas went to a man named H.R. Nagaraj, creating a brand new survey number 21.
But I know you have a major issue with this part of the legal process.
I do. I have to push back on this because to me, it seems like a glaring vulnerability in the justice system. How can a civil court issue a final decree dividing a piece of property when the original title holder, the person whose name is actually on the deed, Vasudevarao, wasn't even named as a plaintiff or a defendant in the lawsuit?
It's a great question.
I mean, he was completely absent from the proceedings. Even as a deceased entity represented by a formal estate, how does that happen?
Well, it highlights how civil courts actually function in real life when it comes to property disputes. Civil courts primarily adjudicate disputes based on the pleadings and the evidence brought forward by the opposing parties standing physically in front of them.
Okay.
So if Party A and Party B come to the court and say, hey, we have a dispute over this specific land, here's our family tree to prove our legal standing, and good news, we've actually reached a compromise, the court's role is mostly just to formalize that settlement.
Okay, that makes the compromise decree essentially a bureaucratic rubber stamp on a forged painting. The court isn't authenticating the underlying history of the painting, like the family tree. It's only authenticating that these two specific people agreed to split it.
That analogy is perfectly accurate. In a compromise decree scenario, the scrutiny can sometimes be significantly lower because there isn't an adversarial party challenging the underlying facts.
Wow.
The court relies on the sworn affidavits provided to them. If individuals lie under oath and submit a fake family tree, the court is essentially being defrauded into issuing a legitimate decree.
For any of you listening who just assume that a court decree is the ultimate foolproof evidence of truth, this completely shatters that illusion.
A court decree is really only as robust as the facts it was built upon. If the foundation is a lie, the decree remains legally binding until it's officially challenged, but it is fundamentally flawed.
Right.
And that flawed decree is exactly what Harish and Nagaraj used as the justification to go to the Land Records Department and initiate that whole Mogini software subdivision process we unpacked earlier.
And once that land is officially split and those new survey numbers are created, the whole strategy shifts. Because holding on to fraudulently acquired land is dangerous. You need to follow the land, which in these disputes is basically following the money.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the broader picture of real estate conflict, this phase is where the legal knot becomes incredibly convoluted and difficult to untangle.
It initiates this real estate hot potato strategy. Once H.R. Nagaraj secured a shiny new single-name record of rights, tenancy, and crops, which is an RTC for his newly created 2 guntas under survey number 21, he did not hold on to it for long.
Not at all.
He rapidly sold it to a man named Ramalingappa.
And Ramalingappa subsequently executed another rapid sale, moving the land to Narayanappa. And Narayanappa is the second respondent in the administrative document we're examining today.
Because moving the asset as fast as you can through multiple hands intentionally complicates any future legal challenges. You basically create layers of plausible deniability.
Exactly.
But Chandrasekhar, our appellant, alleges that this wasn't just a series of innocent transactions. He points out that Ramalingappa, the middleman in this chain, is actually an official witness in a related criminal charge sheet regarding this entire mess.
Which is a huge claim. The implication Chandrasekhar is making is that Ramalingappa knew the land was legally toxic, knew about the alleged fraud regarding the family tree, and basically facilitated moving the asset to distance the original perpetrators from the final owner.
Right.
You know, we must look at the respondent side of the story here.
Yeah.
Because the narrative completely fractures into 2 irreconcilable realities at this point. Narayanappa and his representative Ravikumar H.N. submitted a written petition fighting back very aggressively against all of Chandrasekhar's allegations.
Oh, they definitely didn't take this lying down. Their defense hinges on completely discrediting Chandrasekhar's identity and his timeline of events.
They start by attacking his standing to even bring a complaint in the first place. They claim Chandrasekhar is a fake applicant who resides in a completely different area, specifically in Kodichinkannahalli, Bengaluru.
Okay.
So they argue he has absolutely no genuine connection to the village of Huvanahalli or the ancestral land in question. They characterize him as a nuisance who just continuously interferes in their affairs after facing setbacks in civil court.
They also use a previous legal maneuver against him, pointing out a dismissed police complaint to really bolster their argument that he's just harassing them.
Yeah, according to the document, Chandrasekhar had previously filed a massive criminal complaint at the Middageshi police station against Ramalingappa. He alleged criminal conspiracy, cheating, and forgery under various Indian Penal Code sections.
And what happened with that?
Well, Narayanappa's petition emphasizes that this specific police complaint was investigated and outright dismissed in May 2023. So they are framing the current administrative appeal as just another baseless attack.
But the detail in their defense that absolutely derails the logic of this entire case is their claim about the timeline of the original owner's death.
Oh, this is the wildest part.
It is, because Chandrasekhar provided a death certificate stating Vasudeva Rao died in 1989. But Narayanappa's petition flat out states that this is completely false. They claim Vasudeva Rao passed away 80 to 90 years ago.
Yes.
They explicitly wrote in the document, "There is no one like Vasudeva Rao who died 30 years ago."
This specific disagreement perfectly illustrates the sheer chaos of rural land records over the span of a century.
Yeah.
I mean, you have two adversarial parties presenting completely incompatible historical timelines for the very existence of the man who owned the land.
If he died 90 years ago, that puts his death in the 1930s. We are talking about a pre-independence timeline versus a 1989 timeline. Untangling a knot like this when a third-party buyer like Narayanappa gets involved shows exactly why that hot potato strategy is so devastating.
Let's assume for a moment that Narayanappa truly bought that land in good faith. He checks the recent RTC, which shows a clean title for survey number 21 under a single name. He pays his money, expecting a clean transaction.
Right, he thinks he's good.
Suddenly, he finds himself dragged into a bitter, multi-generational family war over a fabricated family tree he has no connection to, and a man who may have died in 1989 or possibly 1935. Unwinding that legal knot requires a court to prove fraud at every single isolated step of the chain.
Which means what exactly?
It means invalidating the family tree, overturning the civil court decree, voiding the surveyor's notes, reversing the initial sale, and then reversing the subsequent sale. It is a procedural nightmare.
And that nightmare finally landed on the desk of Niranjan MN, who is the technical assistant to the Deputy Commissioner and ex officio Deputy Director of Land Records. Bringing this right up to August 2024, this official had to look at this massive pile of conflicting claims and somehow cut through the noise.
And the official approach in these administrative hearings is to isolate the hard documentary evidence. Niranjan MN didn't have to solve the 1930s versus 1989 debate entirely. He just had to look at the paperwork sitting on his desk and identify the undeniable contradictions that broke the rules of the system itself.
It's kind of like a detective realizing the physical evidence doesn't match the suspect's confession. The official laid out the death certificate produced by Chandrasekhar, noting the recorded passing on December 13th, 1989. Then, sitting right next to it, he looked at the 2021 Takal Podi Mahazar. And during the physical measurement that subdivided the land, the official government record explicitly mentioned the deceased Vasudeva Rao's name and certified that a statement was recorded in his physical presence.
And to compound that massive physical impossibility, the official also noted the 2019 application. The records show that despite Vasudeva Rao being deceased, an application for an 11E sketch, which is tied directly to the court compromise order, was formally received in his name on May 15, 2019.
So the official realizes that, regardless of who bought what from whom, the entire foundational administrative process was built on the physical impossibility of a dead man signing forms and walking a property line.
Exactly. Because the underlying process was so blatantly flawed, the Assistant Director of Land Records in Madhugiri submitted a proposal requesting suo motu powers to cancel the subdivisions made in December 2021.
And just for you listening, if you aren't familiar with the term, suo motu basically means acting on your own authority. The administrative department is essentially saying, hey, we don't need to wait for a sprawling civil court case to untangle the ownership chain. The internal survey process itself was so compromised that we need the unilateral power to just strike these subdivisions from the digital record ourselves.
It acts as an administrative reset button, attempting to roll the land records back to their state before the fraud even occurred. But as you can imagine, Chandrasekhar is pushing for much more than just a clerical reset.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if someone hijacks your ancestral land using a fake family tree and a forged survey, you don't just want the records cleaned up, you want the people who engineered the theft facing real consequences. Chandrasekhar has formally requested that authorities initiate criminal proceedings against H.V. Ramarao, H.R. Harish, and H.R. Nagaraj.
He even cites specific sections of the Indian Penal Code, specifically sections 177, 182, and 203.
What do those cover?
Well, these sections deal with furnishing false information to a public servant, providing false information with the intent to cause a public servant to use their lawful power to the injury of another person, and giving false information respecting an offense committed.
He basically wants them punished for weaponizing the bureaucracy itself. They didn't steal the land with a fence, they stole it with paperwork.
And that encapsulates the core of this entire dispute. It is not just about 2 guntas of dirt in Huvenahali village. It is about the fundamental integrity of the public record.
So why does this matter to you, listening right now? Maybe you don't own agricultural land, and maybe you live in a high-rise in a major city, but this case exposes the fragile trust we all place in official records. We operate under the assumption that because something is stamped, digitized, and sitting in a government database, it is an accurate reflection of reality.
It is a stark reminder that the official record is really only as reliable as the human beings who input the initial data. It places an immense, almost unfair burden on individuals to actively monitor their own records.
Yeah, if Chandrasekhar hadn't been obsessively pulling these survey reports and spotting the dead man's name on a 2021 document, this land would have quietly changed hands forever. The new digital reality on the Mojini software would have completely overwritten the biological truth of his family history.
It highlights the extreme vulnerabilities inherent in property inheritance everywhere. When a generation passes, there is often a gap in the active management of the asset.
Right?
And that temporary gap is the exact window where a fabricated family tree, a compromised court decree, or a fraudulent land survey can be slipped into the system without anyone noticing until it is way too late.
We started with a tiny 4-gunta plot of land. We saw a family tree allegedly pruned to exclude rightful heirs, which led a civil court to unknowingly rubber stamp a compromised decree. We watched as government surveyors documented a man who had been dead for over 30 years as being physically present to agree to property lines. We traced how that newly subdivided land was quickly sold down a chain of buyers to complicate the legal trail, ending up with a buyer who claims the original owner actually died in the 1930s. And finally, we saw a government official forced to step in, identify the glaring physical impossibilities on paper, and recommend wiping the digital slate clean.
It is a truly remarkable collision of human deceit and bureaucratic machinery.
It really leaves you wondering about the future of proof. Because as artificial intelligence gets better at generating fake documents, fabricating histories, and creating synthetic digital identities, the burden of proving you are who you say you are, or even proving that you are alive, is going to shift entirely onto you. The government won't be the guarantor of truth anymore. They will just be the host of the database.
That's a scary thought.
If a manual input on a tablet can resurrect a man dead for 30 years to sign away land today, imagine how hard it will be to protect your own digital paper trail when the fraud becomes automated. The next time you look at a digital record and assume it is the absolute truth, remember the ghost in the land records of Huvenahali village. Suddenly, that diagnostic machine of truth we rely on looks pretty murky after all.